Welcome to the video. We're going to talk about live mode, how to set up your first preset to do a 1 octave 16-beat setup. So yeah, let's get rolling. So the first thing we want to do is start at a default setup as we have here, and then create this 1 octave 16-beat system. To do that, first we can hold down your Alt key on your Windows keyboard and get your glue tube and glue this up into one big 4-measure 16-beat chord. So now we've gone to having our 4 chords, each at 4 beats, to one large chord with 16 beats or 4 measures. Great, step 1 complete. Now we know our structure little inspector is up there. We can hit that. And we know that we want to have 1 octave, which means that's 12 keys on your physical keyboard. So we need 12 of these. So we can just hit the plus sign until we get 12 of them. So let's just add a bunch. And 12. All right. So now if we take this, now we want to zoom out. So what we just created needs to be zoomed into. So right now, an easy way to do it is just take your shift, hold down shift and hit the loop bar. Turn that off. And then you get your pencil tool and click right around here. It doesn't matter where, but just get your pencil tool and double click and you'll see the whole thing we just created. All right, second step complete. So now we're going to write in the chords we're going to use for this C major scale. And to know which chords are on white keys and which are on black, which I will explain a little later, we need to first now, for the first time, go into live mode. So you can use this button or you can hit F7. So that's the new live mode, hotkey F7. Let's hit it. And now you can see a representation of a keyboard, physical keyboard, black and white keys on our strip here. Now, you notice that our chords are 16 beats long, but these are still in 1 measure lengths, okay? So that means that we have to right-click on our live system here and get some more different options. And since we want nice long 16-beat measures and chords, we switch this to chords. And now that will represent one key on your keyboard with 1 measure and 1 chord on our display. Starting to make sense? And you will also notice that it has the C2, and so it tells you that it's currently going to show up on your keyboard at your C2 register. So on your physical keyboard, normally C3 is right in the middle. And if you know where your repeating octaves are, where you have the white, the black, the white, the black, 2 white, then, and so on and so forth, that's your octave. So middle C, we want that to be set up to middle C on your keyboard because more than likely that's where you want to play your first demonstration here and get used to the system. So let's use our middle mouse wheel to scroll to middle C, which is C3. But on your keyboard, it may be different, but it will show up somewhere and you'll know if it's not on, it'll be next to it. So, but generally it should be C3. Now we click off of there and you see that it's still on C2 here on the display. Simply go back to your regular mode or hit your hotkey to F1. Now go back and it will have updated. So now we have the display of your keyboard matched up with our chords, and they're all nicely 16 beats long, and they're ready to be mapped to your keyboard, but we have no physical notes yet down here in our track 1, and we're going to set that up next. So I'm sure you know how to get an instrument hooked up to the first track here. And we should relabel our first track, double click on the name, and call it chords, because we're going to start with simple chords. That's the best way to learn this type of system. And for me, I'm going to have a plugin host because I'm inside of Studio One. I'm using the plugin version of RC. and it's set to channel 1. And on channel 1, I'm going to be playing to start the strings voicing from the orchestra complete. All right, so now if I want that hooked up to RC in my DAW, I have to make sure that we have RC here, and that's hooked up with the monitor on. It's ready to go. But my orchestra complete needs, I have to make sure it's set up to Rapid Composer for the input, and it is. And I need to make sure that it's on channel 1, and it is up there. And that's what we have here. Plug in host, channel 1. We're good to go. The sound is connected, and the monitors are on. And now I can zoom this back, and we can talk about the final things to consider, the chords, and just to make sure everything's set up right, and then begin an actual demonstration. So now is a good time for you to save the project. I would save it as your live setup, 1 octave, 16 beats. That's what I would title it. So you could just go here, and you could say save composition as, and again, I would call it your live setup, 1 octave, 16 beats. So save it out. And then next, now we're going to talk about the chords selection. So they're all currently on C, but we want to set up the C major scale on the white keys. We're not concerned about the black keys today, but because we have this handy guide, we know exactly where the white keys on your middle C are going to be. So you can click on the C and choose your chords. C major, we're going to set up the C major scale on just the white keys here. So let's do it. And your interface here, you'll see that chords on C major. And there should be 7 to the scale. All the scales has 7 degrees. So the C is already on C, so we could hit it. And then the next white key, we go to that measure, and we see that the D minor is the 2nd degree. We hit that. We go to the next white key, and we just keep on. E minor, white key. Make sure you're getting the white keys to the F. So next one will be the G, and next the A minor, and then the B diminished. So what do we have here? We've got C, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, and D diminished. That is the C major scale. Do not be concerned with the black keys at this point. We want the C major scale laid out on just the 7 white keys on the middle of your physical keyboard, so you can play a C scale at whatever form you want, and you can try out all the different combinations. But next, we need to add an instrument and MIDI notes. We have our instrument hooked up, which we just did. We need to add chords so that we can actually hear something. And you may want to save again at this point because you have your chords put in. So now it's very simple. Just make sure you have your hotkey set up if you're in your DAW. I like to just click, make sure I'm on my chords track. I hit Shift H, and now it populates all our chords. And so all the white keys now have MIDI information. And you could again save, for you should never have to do this again. So next time that you want to play a live system, you literally just go here and you load up whatever you saved it as, right? So just save it again, make sure you're ready to go instantly next time, and you won't have to do this type of setup again. All right, so a few other things to consider, because this is your first time. We have the register on your keyboard where you want it, and you can change this. You don't have to have it on C1, but I imagine you're sitting by your keyboard somewhere in the middle. By chords, we changed because we want these full long 16-beat chords. Play while held, that's fine. Just leave that there for now. And quantize trigger, I would suggest for your first time to set these both at an eighth. And that will simply quantize your input so that when you're changing chords, and if you were to be playing with other music, it would have your key changes quantized. So because it's a single instrument, that really won't come into play. But if you leave it at a quarter, you will notice a delay in your input. You will perceive it as lag, but it's really because your input's being quantized. So if you're really good at, being in beat, changing your chords to the beat of the music, you could have these off or set it to a 16th, right? You have your choice. But for now, a new user, just stick it to an eighth and you'll feel a 16th note delay, but that's the way to get started, right? So now, having your instrument and everything set up, you may want to save again, but you should be able to hit your notes on your keyboard and you will see the notes here, the chords light up. So I'll go with the first one, C, and so it lights up. I'm playing one of the 7 notes of the octave on the keyboard, and I can choose now what I can experiment with the order of these 7 degrees of the C scale, and I can start to sketch and experiment. So let's do that. Let's go from the tonic to the 4th, to the 5th, and then back to the tonic. So that's just a simple 1 to 4 to 3. Did I do? Whatever. It's your first progression. But unlike having this written out as a phrase where it plays the timeline and you have to pre-select your chord changes, and you could just shift to F1 and you could play this as a normal phrase, but it's going to play the black key chords too, but it's still set up that way. But notice how long that's playing, because that is up to 16 beats long. But notice if I was to play it in the old-fashioned linear way, it's just going to go through all of that, then slowly to the next chord. But that's still all available. But when we go back to F7, Realtime, I determine how long these chords are, so to speak, how long these transitions are by my ears. And so now I hold down the C, go to the 5th, now I can hold down that C as long as I want, and it will just loop within the 16 beats. See that? It just keeps on looping as long as you hold that down. And I've got aftertouch on this keyboard, so it tends to re-trigger sometimes, but if you hold down your key too hard. But generally, so yeah, that's the way it works. Now experiment with just trying different. And now you're writing progressions in real time. See how interesting that is? It's just, you've gone from static phrases to experimenting all the different possibilities and combinations of a simple C major chord with one instrument. Next, we're going to start to talk about, going a little bit further. We're currently playing a sustained instrument, and it doesn't really respond to velocity. But now I'm going to switch my strings sustain to scroll down a little bit, to a staccato voicing. Now this instrument will respond to velocity. So why that's important is this, or any phrase, and if I go to F2, which you can do directly from F7 or live mode, you're going to see it. Well, first I should render it down so you don't get confused. Now we talked about rendering, so just hit your R key so that when we go to F2, you get what we expect here. And I've talked about that. But you see that all these notes have their own velocity built in, baked into these notes. So it's taking the velocity, and you can change it here, but you're getting the velocity from this phrase right now. Let's go back to F7, live mode. Now, when I press a staccato, that instrument is sensitive to how hard I press the key on my physical keyboard. But if I have this set up to pattern, it's still going to just get the velocity from the pattern. And that's currently like 100%, very high, way too high. But you may want that, but just know that you can play this system either by your own touch or the velocity of whatever your phrase has. And I could easily turn that all down inside this phrase. But let's switch to, and if you hover over the pattern icon here, because these are the new tools, and this one up here, to help you, to give you more options playing live. The bottom one pertains to how you play and the feedback you get. So I don't want the pattern right now. I'm going to use my middle mouse wheel. I'm going to change it to key mode. That means now if I hit my key on my physical keyboard, you know, it's very light. If I choose, I can be very light. Or, see? So now I can not only play and choose whatever chords I want, I learn now that I can play it in any type of velocity. So now we're getting even more realistic to what you would get if you were an actual piano player. But I can choose the chords. I can choose all aspects of this. I am still able to play a triad with one finger, but the musician says, yeah, but I've got control with my finger. And yes, you do, but you're getting your control with the key here, or you can change it to a blend of the actual phrase and or your key stroke. So you're able to play chords with one finger, but you're still getting the instant feedback. You're able to play that chord if though you were playing it with three fingers with one finger. You have the velocity control, you have the timing controls up here with quantization. So now you have the benefits of having chords on a scale, and you have the benefits of having all kinds of octaves filled with all kinds of complex or simple scales and borrowed chords, or chords that will take you into something scary and creepy or romantic and fun. It's all laid out, and it's easy to remember what is what because it's all displayed before your eyes in very logical ways. As an example, you know in front of your hand right there, you know you have the C major scale on those 7 white keys. So you're learning music, you're playing and choosing your chord progressions on the fly, and you're playing dynamically, and you're choosing what instruments and how you can stack them. And then you can get into things like controller tracks and using CC data so that when you're playing this chord that lasts so long, you can have it slowly sustain in, just like a piano player would play a sustained chord in opus, right? So you're getting way more functionality, but you're maintaining the feel, the timing, and all the dynamics that you would have if you were a keyboardist playing something like opus. Next, we'll just sum it up for this first video. So in the next video, we're going to talk about adding another instrument, not just having one long sustaining chord, but having that chord evolve and beginning to bring movement into these chord choices, deciding what instruments you want to be dynamic, maybe set to key mode, which ones you want to have on the phrase velocity mode. But really, you can set this up so that you're playing dynamic orchestral arrangements once you learn the basics. And I suggest to just play these simple chords, do the chord changes in whatever way you want, find out how it works, get to learn how the changing chords, get your fingers used to changing chords. You may want to switch to different instruments, maybe try a piano, and you may want to take these chords. And of course, because we're inside of Rapid Composer, at any time you can change them and edit them and use all the variations, all the generators. You simply would, if you want to change the phrase, just go straight to F1. If you want to change the notes, go to F2, make your changes to velocity, do all the things you want, and then just hit F7, you're back and you're playing it live again. So it adds this layer of orchestration that you can do live. And when you blend sustaining notes with notes that have movement on different tracks, you'll notice that it becomes very interesting. I would say it's the exact same thing what you have in Opus, because when you hold down a chord in Opus or in the orchestra, it will play some animated themes if you're using an animated preset. You get more options here because you can have the chord that lasts as long as you want. You can have as many instruments as you want, and you can edit and change the MIDI in more ways than those programs offer. So that's the first tutorial on the setup of live mode. Much more to come. See you on the next one.